Hi, everybody. This is John Wolpert with the Baseline Show, and this is the latest episode of the Baseline Protocol Q&A weekly session we do every week at noon, U.S. Eastern, on YouTube live streaming, and also on Zoom. For those of you who are members of the Baseline Protocol, which you can become by getting onto baseline-protocol.org and signing up for the Slacks. We're going to have a really light, fast show today. And in fact, we might end it really fast. I'm going to give you a link to something that's happening right now that people are excited about. And honestly, if I were me, or if I were you, I'd be going over there as fast as I can to see Ernst & Young and a whole bunch of other cool companies, some folks from Berkeley around a thing called Zeeksy, and other teams working on baseline-oriented protocols around zero knowledge. It's a great show, and I'm going to put the link in the chat right now. Hang on for a second. I can find that link. And so, if folks have questions, please ask them. This show, we're going to do some interviews going forward in future weeks with all sorts of folks, and that'll be fun. But we're also always here to answer questions about anything you need to know about getting involved with the Baseline Protocol, getting questions answered about details on technology, on all sorts of things like that. Kyle Thomas is here, one of the maintainers, and he can answer any questions if you want to jump on. But again, I think this is going to be a pretty light session, and that's the way it should be. So let me just give you the link to the event. Hey, Kyle, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Yeah, no, I think that UI event is just so good.
Yes, that's awesome.
As soon as I can myself.
Yeah, same.
So
yeah, it was pretty cool.
Those guys do it right.
Things are shaping up.
Yeah. I'm very excited about that Berkeley work. Berkeley, Johns Hopkins, other folks around zero knowledge.
It's very, very cool. Yeah.
It took me 4 hours to read that paper, and one of my eyes fell out doing it.
Yeah, it's very interesting what they're doing.
All right, where is this link? There it is. Copy link. Here's the link. So there is a question here already. Any baseline integration guidance for integrating with Chainlink? As people,
we're working on it.
We're on it.
We're working on it. We actually had a call with the Chainlink folks earlier today. I think there's going to be, we're literally working on it. There will be guidance.
Yeah, well, and there's also a link. I tweeted out yesterday when I talked to Jonathan EID, or Johan. Sorry, Johan. Apologies for that. Johan Eid from Chainlink and a number of other teammates of his, and they are quite excited about spinning up this project on using Oracle and Chainlink, using a Chainlink Oracle. It could be weather, it could be another variable that we want to parameterize into something, Kyle, like an additional conditional statement on the purchase order. So just taking the low-hanging fruit of the Radish 34 example and saying, well, now we're going to add a condition that says that if the purchase order comes in when the temperature is over this, then we'll give a further discount, right? Just simple.
Right. Yeah, we're looking at using price as well for the invoice tokenization.
Right, and that might come over like Chainlink has this really cool public knowledge thing with Google Bigtable. So we might pull that off of Google Bigtable, and that would be pretty cool. But bottom line is the reason that's important is if you've got some SAP system over here and some Oracle Apps or JD Edwards system over here, or Microsoft Dynamics here, or what have you, and they're all baselined, that means they're all going to execute that code. And if they execute that code at the wrong moment, or inevitably they're going to introduce non-determinism if it's a variable that changes around. like
Yep.
LIBOR or some I suppose a cryptocurrency price,
Yeah.
But it could be something else. It could be some real world thing, right? Which
it's even more interesting in the cryptocurrency case. Have some like weather data or some other prediction market sort of inputs.
Yeah, anything where you really need to trust that nobody's fooling around with that data, but you also need to be sure that the function the function that you're calling is if it's being called in multiple places and then ultimately has to generate a deterministically synchronous result to the others.
Yeah.
You're going to have a mess, right? And by the way, Kyle, I mean, maybe I'll ask you a question today about this. And obviously, the Chainlink guys are probably all over at the EY event as well, and they are planning to be on future. We're going to interview them later on this month when they can be on, and but just kind of the baseline system pretty well, like maybe one of the best, most knowledgeable right now at this point. Which, folks, if you're a developer looking to really make a name for yourself, I mean, Kyle has become the MVP player in the baseline community. Everybody loves him, and there's still opportunity to make a name for yourself. I mean, Kyle, I don't want to blow sunshine your way, but people call me all the time going, "Hey, can Kyle join our team?" And I'm like, "Pay him enough money." So,
it's been a great experience so far, and I think we're turning the corner on getting this initial sort of protocol out there to the community, and the opportunities are going to just explode, I think.
Right on. So let's talk about the Chainlink notion, or the Oracle notion here. Do you have any thoughts on the design of? I suspect that there's going to be a little bit of brain surgery that we're going to have to do on the protocol, and maybe an additional part of the specification, the standard, where we specifically need to stipulate, hey, if you're, how do you make sure that you don't write a function? I mean, when you put the business logic entirely in the zero knowledge circuit, which is an expensive way to go, good thing to do for some things, but if you just want to write some Python and put it in a container and send that to your counterparties and make sure that everybody does that the same, and use the consistency circuit just on its base usage, right? Just say, I don't know what's being consistent, but it's all consistent, right? And now you've got some code in there that says, now we're going to need some tools to say, hey, this code is work step. Yes, it is entangled with the previous work step, or no, this is a new work step workflow, right? So this is the head end of a new workflow.
I think
there will be some different attributes.
I think there will be some follow-on work to do to sort of put some rails around various languages, and how, just providing those tools to make it really easy to just write the business logic in that language of choice, and then whatever package we release there, where it just runs.
Certainly in the documentation, and I would think in anything where we set up a requires, right? We can say requires, if you're going to do, if you're going to call, if you're going to parameterize certain things, you're going to need to know that you better pull that from an Oracle, or you're going to get a mess, or you're just simply, you're not going to pass that proof, right?
Yeah. So generally, yeah.
I mean, it's the same. It's kind of the off-chain version of the same problem you would get. The reason why we need oracles in blockchain, right? Because you don't want one node in a blockchain network, pulling a piece of data. I mean, I think people miss that, right? That they think about this blockchain, like the Chainlink verification network, making sure that data is not.
The way I see it is simply like a way for it could even be like at the work group level, where you could say, require 6 block confirmations from this Oracle service, and then you basically have a frame of reference to use. Oh, we're just going to use 6 block confirmations, in the past, whatever the Oracle's value was, that's the value we're going to use, sort of thing. Okay. And then at that point, though, you still have this similar race condition as far as like what block you're currently on. There's like a relative, So it's we could work around that. That's just like a really like naive. It's a naive proposal, sort of, to get the conversation going, and get something that's implemented and working.
Yeah, so those are the kinds of issues that the team working on that particular project. And I'm going to put this in the Zoom. I'll let me go find. I'm not sharing my screen, but I'll just grab the link. Copy link. Using oracles and workflow. So here, for anybody, if you're watching from home, then you can grab that link on the YouTube channel. I'll go over to. I do see that we've got people here, so I'll make some folks. Aaron Kendall is in, and Scott Stevenson. All right, guys, you're in. So we're having a fun conversation here. A pretty small group because, again, I just told everybody to go back over to the E&Y conference, the E&Y event. Here's the here's the chain link.
Jumped out of that one to jump back in here.
Yeah, I think we'll probably hold to exactly a half hour on this one today, unless we get a bunch of people coming in. But we always want to be here at noon with somebody to answer questions about. That's why we called it office hours to begin with. These are getting like a couple hundred, and sometimes I think one of them got 1,000 or more views. So for a weekly wonky show about something like a back-end protocol for business-to-business system integration, I think that's pretty good.
Every week in our LexDAO call, and they still look at me like I'm a crazy person. Like Radish 34, you've got to go there, because we hack on Solidity contracts every week, and I just can't get their eyes over there yet. They're working on a Moloch variant, which I think is cool. That's what we're working on, but I just keep reading the baseline stuff. Eventually it's going to click. And the Socrates and the night light that they announced today, I love it. I'm going to dig in there because that's what I've always needed, is that encryption, messaging back and forth. So finally, I'm going to dig into that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. And as I said, I think on our SSC call on Monday, I think there's a real business opportunity for companies like the folks behind Socrates, like Aztec, like Ernst & Young's own research and development team. They providing services to generate libraries. Kyle, what do you think of this? Right? I mean, if you're just doing something that needs to have consistency from between different systems of record, you can just use the new generic circuit that is going to come out in the init core package later this month, right?
Yeah, so I definitely think that the zero knowledge stuff, like the more complicated stuff, is like definitely a problem that we'll start to see some sort of commercials like easing or like easier adoption over the next 6 to 18 months. You can absolutely use the general, like the generic circuit that is shipping with init core to get the ball rolling on proof of consistency between two systems of record. Something that we're focused on at Provide is actually how do we make that even easier in terms of the next step. So I definitely think
I'll throw out something that I just came across that's at least interesting. I decided finally to join the HackFS hackathon that Juan Benet of IPFS is throwing, and there's a company out there that you guys maybe know about called Textile.io, and they are allowing for encrypted buckets of data to be put through Filecoin on their node system, which allows maybe an alternative to the ZK snarks, which still seems a little complicated to me, but it's going to be great for EY and their clients. But for my use case, which is management of digital evidence for court systems, it seems like if we just take the evidence and then pre-encrypt it right before it goes out to IPFS, and then we're using the Ethereum chain to basically put that in a 721, then we can use the 721 to go out and look at the encrypted file, and then somehow they're using like this embedded encryption scheme within that encrypted bucket that if you don't share the sort of the algorithm they're using to encrypt it, which gets embedded actually in the IPFS file, that you'll be safe. So what they say is you take your information that's unencrypted, you leave it locally on your own IPFS node, you bucketize it. The encryption is then put in that bucket, and now it's all encrypted on the IPFS, and then you send it out to the public IPFS court systems. So I know that sounded a little complicated, but that's what I'm going to dig into too. So it's somewhere between the ZK snarks and somewhere in between this bucketing of IPFS using Filecoin for consistency.
It's interesting. I think they're different really use cases. I think the actual data is part of the system of record, and the zero knowledge stuff is actually for something different.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we have a hard time with our blockchain community, right? We've had this shiny toy called blockchain, and decentralized systems like IPFS, of course, and all these things. And now we want everything to be on those. And I'm like, we invented this thing called the database a few years ago. And it's kind of pretty good technology. Maybe we could still use that sometimes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think just understanding the separation of what the zero knowledge proofs are really for, which is more in the baseline context, the proof of consistency. Whereas like what you're speaking to in that IPFS example is more just like a database.
Yeah, well, I mean, the problem with IPFS as the go-to, though, I mean, is that it's great if you're doing something like a CDN, right? Like I think a lot of these like Filecoin and storage, their first obvious use case is CDN, right? So content.
Like Netflix could really benefit from it.
Yeah, like a Netflix, right? Like, so if I was Akamai, I'd be on the lookout, right, for what's happening there. I bet they're very close to space.
I totally agree, and that's why for me, I have to get this evidence in front of the judges or the lawyers or the defendant's eyes. So I need to encrypt that content. Actually, some of it can be unencrypted if it's some public case, but most of that court documentation of evidence, it's voluminous and it has to be encrypted. So it has to be for your eyes only. So I have to do kind of both sides.
Hey, Kyle, sorry, Scott, could you mute while you've still got that weird server ringing, and I think your server generates some kind of weird moire.
Sorry, audio. I don't think I can hear it. It's there.
Yeah, we can hear it. So you might want to mute while you're not talking. Scott, would you like to introduce yourself, by the way? And Aaron, you feel free as well, or not.
Yeah, is my mic offending?
No, not yours.
It was mine. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, I'm Scott Stevenson. For the last couple of years, I really fell into the Ethereum thing in 2016. I realized the microtransactions and the persistency on a public blockchain would be the way of the future. I thought it would go a little bit faster. It's nice to see the integrations. I love what's happening with Chainlink. But what hasn't happened is the adoption of the Web3 technology. So I've taken my concept of, helping real world court systems managing all of this volumes of digital evidence that is stored on people's cell phones and body cams with all the police officers and, private investigators out there taking pictures with their phone and losing them on, it's like I could just go on and on. The county I live in, Orange County, the sheriff's department just lost like this a case with some of their investigators that weren't properly documenting evidence, and they were hiding it and breaking all these laws. So digital evidence, we're only collecting more of it over time. So I'm just trying to figure out a way to use the blockchain technology, Ethereum, public chain, encryption, and move that forward. It could take me 10 years to do it.
Oh, well, I think that's a very promising use case area. Area for what baselining is about, right? But again, if the data is sensitive, then I don't think I'd want to put it on even IPFS, right? Because let's put it this way. I don't want to comment what I would do, but I think a lot of enterprises and a lot of government agencies are not going to anytime soon be putting those things full out on a fully decentralized system where anybody running a node has access to the bits, right?
Even if it's encrypted, if you lose the key, if the key becomes compromised, it's out there forever. So yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's right. And you, of course, if you can't control who has it, and GDPR is quite clear on this, right? If you have the bits, whether they're encrypted or not, doesn't matter. You need to be able to terminate those bits. upon request, right? So if you can't do that because they're spread out all over a bunch of nodes that you don't control, that's a problem.
You should see what we do today in the law. You should see
Oh.
how we manage our evidence today. It's
Crazy.
disgusting. Yeah.
I think it's arguable if the keys are controlled by in a place where you can actually delete the keys and do that when a user invokes their right to be forgotten. I think that's actually, and maybe that's not how the law is written or interpreted today, but I feel like that is a good solution to the GDPR problem, even though the bits are encrypted everywhere.
Well, in theory, but GDPR might disagree.
In theory, I'm not saying it's legal advice or anything. I'm just saying I feel like that the law, there's going to need to be some political and
oh yeah, life is long, right? Maybe in the future, and I like to live in the future. I live usually 18 months in the future myself, but lately I've been trying to kind of turn a new leaf and be here in the present and say, okay, what can we get away with today? What will enterprises do today? And today, that's where the baseline, Scott, that's where baseline protocol can be really useful. You say, look, CISO at the police department, you don't have to worry about where that data, sending that data onto a new threat surface. Leave it where it is. We can talk about whether that's a good place for it or not, or whether you're managing it well. But let's just baseline that data so that so that people know for sure that it hasn't been tampered with, and that any counterparties that need to have acknowledged the receipt of the information can do so without repudiation.
You'd be amazed to see how many private investigators use Gmail to pass over sensitive information that should be private from the get-go for chain of custody. So all I want to do is to provide just an alternative to the horrible ways it's done today, and I think we'll go from there. It's also why in part of LexDAO, where we're a bunch of lawyers that talk about this type of stuff to see how we can still come up with a solution without creating too much heat for ourselves, where we're in court all the time trying to fight for those privacy standards or against those privacy standards.
Just a little quick plug for something else that Kyle's doing. Kyle's doing so much, man. Once we deliver the init core later this month, there's a thing called there's a DocuSign integration, baselining DocuSign
love it
agreements, right? So, and then what I think is really cool about that, and I've said this before on other shows, so people probably heard it before, and I wonder, Scott, if this isn't something that would be really useful, is imagine a product that is, pretty straightforward SaaS product, right? Effectively a Mongo database on a cloud or a set of clouds, or Mongo databases, multi-tenant, where if you're a small company that doesn't know anything about IT and you get a DocuSign, you click it and you sign some agreement. Now the data from that agreement, now DocuSign APIs for actual data from those things, in part using a company a friend of mine that runs called Clause. Now they're not on Ethereum. I think they should be, but they'll say that they're blockchain agnostic probably, so that they could be on Ethereum. But because everybody says they're blockchain agnostic, it's adorable. Oh, we're blockchain agnostic, but we use Ethereum.
That sounds like what we say.
Yeah.
But we definitely had a significant focus on the ETM first.
Indeed. I don't want to make too much fun of that. Sometimes that's a perfectly legitimate thing to say.
A couple of lines, and now you handle the second blockchain, and you're blockchain agnostic.
Sure. Yeah. So I've run startups before, and startups don't have time for optionality, right? We've got time for one thing, so you got to choose sometimes. Anyway, but the bottom line is, imagine just being able to click a button and say, now for $9.95 a month, you've got a system of record that can be baselined with somebody else's very complicated, expensive ERP system. You don't have to worry about that. You just know that, you can go into like a web interface or an app and see that, what documents or what agreements or what processes you have baselined with other parties, so that you know what your obligations are and what their obligations are to you in one easy peasy view. I think it's a great idea. And Scott, wouldn't you say that would be something that would be very helpful in your space? I mean, if they're already using Gmail, right?
That's what I've been trying to do. That's why I started the Web3 VM, which stands for Web3 Vending Machine. And what we're trying to do is just find the best little smart contracts that do some basic functionality, and we're going to create UIs on top of it, and lead people there and go, well, what is it that you need? And then the Solidity contract is exposed to them. We kind of explain what it does, so it can be it can be reviewed, but it just does some basic functions, taps the Ethereum blockchain in the most primitive way. Maybe we tag a data blob in it. Maybe we follow the 721 standard. I don't really know exactly how it's going to spin out, but that's what I like about Radish 34 also. It's what we can get in there and go, well, this is pretty complicated. And if we had to overlay all these smart contracts, it might be too complicated for what we need. But what I started with is just on one of the little applications I made on my website, simple UI. You go there, you encrypt a file, it goes to IPFS, you get the return hash, and in the next exact step, it fires off the Ethereum transaction with that hash of the encrypted data. And now, it costs 10 cents, or depending on the gas price, $1. But now you have at least that starting point encryption over to this other thing that you can parse on the chain, go get the data. Hopefully somebody gave you the decode key, and now you decode it. Ignoring all of those other things you talked about as far as privacy concerns, the GPDR and all of that, but at least it's
let's just ignore the privacy concerns.
well, you know what I mean. But not everything needs to be private. If you've seen a lot of the court cases that I've been involved in, all the stuff's public anyway. When you walk into a court, it's public.
Sorry, Scott. I was just giving you a hard time.
Yeah, I know you are. It's like a lot of people do. It's the first thing lawyers say.
It was just.
Like,
yeah. Okay. Let's just throw those out.
Here, let me intervene here. And by the way, wonderful conversation. Thanks for that. Aaron, feel free to dive in if you'd like, or if you're lurking or listening.
Well, I'm generally a lurker. Yeah, that's kind of what I do. So I hope I don't sound weird on this headset. I'll just say one thing real quick. I met Kyle last week, or maybe it was with Juan. I don't know if you remember that conversation, but I mentioned the Seth Rogen.
Of course.
Okay, all right. So yeah. Basically, I'm curious about how to, extend or give the ability for developers to kind of plug in their own functionality into Baseline, especially with rules. Like, if I want to, is there a standardized way to somehow provide an interface that gets called at some point in the Baseline protocol? So yeah, because the reason I'm interested is I'm crazily, or I don't know, I think it's somewhat a little crazy, trying to create a rules engine in Solidity. So obviously that's, got its own, design choices that are hard to make. But so I created something basic that works, and I'm trying to refine it with the Diamond implementation. But yeah, I guess I'm more curious of how could I possibly integrate that with the Baseline protocol. So I'm just kind of listening and lurking.
Hey, that's good, Aaron. And I would say, Kyle, wouldn't you agree that, I mean, that's sort of the point is, if you put rules engines on the blockchain, it's a pretty expensive way to do it. It's using the blockchain as a live, back-end state machine. Right. Blockchains are not terribly good at that, and probably never will be. I think here I can say this: any state machine that requires consensus of any kind will be less performant than a similar state machine that does not require consensus. So it will always be less performant than something that doesn't require it. So you want to use it where performance is less important than other things. And ultimately,
validation. I was going to just add that, for the most part, especially if you want to change state, but validation, right. There is a possibility for that. Like if you're just
exactly right, validation is the thing, right? So if you're
and that could be, you could fire off some rules that simply validate something, and it would not be so cost prohibitive. So that's actually more where if this is going to have any sort of possibility, it would obviously just be for that. And but it works, at least the initial implementation. So
validation around
pretty interesting.
It is. So the way I understand it is it can be used as a pattern for upgradability around the org registry and the branches that could result from within a work group essentially. I'd love to see your code, Aaron, and take a look at it.
Maybe you might not actually. if you look at
I would.
All right. Well, if you're interested, sure. I mean,
yeah, no, I'd love to. That's where I see it. That's where I see it as potentially an opportunity for baseline is in the contracts package. We're definitely looking at how we make things more upgradable.
Right.
There's obviously like the open Zeppelin approach, which is sort of like the standard, like the standard way to do it. That, has its
right.
There's trade-offs, and for the nicety you get with open Zeppelin, you don't have as much extensibility. So I'd love to see what you're putting together.
Yeah, I put it in the chat. It's the Solidity contract. There's the Diamond one, but that's like in progress. But there's another
cool.
one that's like.
I'll take a look at this, and I'll hit you up offline.
All right, that's fine. And then there's in Ethereum, the C# part is, that's one stuff I work with one that, it basically interacts with those contracts through C#. So
cool.
Yep.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
Anyway, that's all I got to add. I know I kind of.
For the audience, let's let people know what an Ethereum is, so that because they might not.
Oh, yeah. So it's just a C# bridge to the Ethereum blockchain, so that if you wanted to write some C# code that does all of the goodies of firing up a transaction or just pulling off values off a contract, so it does all of that, or it gives you the ability as a C# developer to do that. So it's just another avenue, another bridge to Ethereum.
Cool. So I'd like to let me cut off the conversation here because I'm mindful of the time, and I also want to make sure that we get to some of the questions in the live stream. We got 50 people watching this thing right now, even when I told everybody to go over to the E&Y thing. So here's
John, maybe you could mention, because I haven't been in many of the meetings, are there little sort of like user interfaces that are getting created so we can sort of like overlay some of the baseline 34 smart contracts and start playing with them, or do we just have to go to Remix and sort of like recompile them and interact with the contracts that way?
Kyle, I think that's right up your alley. You want
to? So the question was, is there a UI we can overlay to see what's going on with the current contracts in the baseline repository?
Yeah, it might not be super complicated, but yeah, to use some of the functionality of some of the lower level, low hanging fruit sort of interoperability between the smart contracts.
Got it. So I would take a look at the init core branch, and there's basically an example app that's coming together. It's still labeled as work in progress. However,
I'm sorry, which one was it? I missed which one you said.
Init core.
We could put a link in the chat, but there's a core package that has the contracts in it. You can take those. You can like flatten them. You can run make flat, I think it is, and it'll dump a flattened version that you could take to Remix if you wanted to play around. That's one option. The other option is there's an example app which is labeled work in progress. It's under examples / baseline app, and that one will, if you run it end to end, will deploy all the contracts, and so you can see, and we'll probably put it in line, put a block explorer in line, so you can actually not stumble around in the console. There's also an option where if you enable,
which one was that last one you just mentioned? I'm going to write it down.
Example app. It's a work in progress still, but you can go there and see that working.
Sure.
The block explorer's not in there yet. There's also something that's coming that works there currently. If you enable a few certain flags, and these just need to be added to the documentation. If you add a few parameters in the environment when you run the indent test suite, it will enable the Ropsten testnet, and all the transactions will actually go into the public blockchain using keys. But it'll be documented. But you just need a couple of parameters to essentially enable the faucet to pay the gas for all your transactions that get emitted underneath the test suite. So that's actually a pretty cool bit of functionality that's in init core, where you can just run the integration suite for the example app and see it on the public blockchain.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I'm just answering some questions about the link to the EY. Apparently, I must have set up the link filtering by accident on YouTube, so it's not showing up. Go to my profile. So on Twitter, It's right there. Okay. In a post. So let's get to some of these questions real quick. DPD says that, yeah, we'll go up to the top. Is baseline focusing on certain, well, Andy Arbite asks if, is baseline focusing on certain industries to start out? Is there a game plan? Which companies are being approached? And the answer is, I mean, the game plan is again, because baselining is a standard by the Oasis Foundation. Oasis is bringing in a lot of companies. I get a call kind of like every day by Oasis saying, hey, this new company wants to consider joining the standards body and for baseline, and then I've got to go pitch, explain what baselining is all about to them. And so we get that like every day. Something, you know, somebody is some pretty notable company is asking to get the brief, and usually along the lines of, hey, we want to make sure that our fingerprints are on this standard. Which relates to another question. Somebody asked, what are the competitors to baseline? Are there other approaches? So obviously, as a standard and as a reference implementation, and as not a platform, not a product, not a coin, token, or scheme, as we often say, there's no real competitors from a commercial perspective. In fact, the point is to remove the need for competing on this particular subject, right? Just like the same, we don't have a bunch of competitors about TCP/IP. There's no profit in datagram transmission unless you're selling routers, but that's a whole different game, right? You're not tariffing websites, and that's really the power of the internet, is to say, hey, you don't have to pay every time you send a packet to somebody. And so that removes the profit motive, which also removes the need for if you have a profit in something, then somebody's going to say, hey, well, use mine. No, use mine. No, use mine. And balkanization. So if you say, look, baselining is not a product, it's not something you profit from directly, but can drive lots of profitable activities if everybody has a standard, then that's the point, right? So that's why it's not a platform, product, or solution. It's simply it's not a cell. It's just a piece of RNA that you can graft into.
And it took
cells.
a couple years for enterprise to come up with that conclusion, because they were all talking private, and then they finally came around.
I was part of that. I was like, hey, blockchains look like databases. We like to sell databases. Let's sell some database blockchain. Right? Let's sell some databases and let's put the word blockchain on it to see if people will buy more of it. So
I got to tell you this, John, it was really funny. A couple years ago, I was watching some executive in one of the offshoots from Microsoft talking about Ethereum, and I could see it on his face. He's like, we just haven't figured out how to turn profits on this thing yet. And I think they're still trying to figure it all out.
I was on the internet. I was on the internet team at IBM in the 90s. John Patrick and the great John Patrick and the great Irving Wilowski-Berger and the great Lou Gerstner and so many other wonderful people. And nobody knew how to make money on the internet either. It's like, how do we sell this thing? And when you realize, no, it's not about the internet, it's about commerce. And the internet just makes commerce suck less, and that you focus on commerce. It changed, that suddenly clearly we were not wrong to be interested in the internet in the mid 90s. Same thing, I think, with blockchain in general. And I think baselining is not about blockchain. Baselining is about business process automation between multiple parties. So we've been spending millions and billions of dollars on business process management inside single companies and ERP systems inside single companies. And now we're saying, no. The whole world is starting to realize that if you have a $1 billion system that can only tell you what you think you know, and not with confidence what your counterparties know, then you've got a system that isn't doing much for you.
I think it was the CEO or maybe CFO of FedEx that I saw about a year ago, and he said, we finally realized that we have to do this thing called what did he call it? Cooperative competition. I think he said it was cooperation or something. And he said, we owe it to each other, being FedEx and DHL and UPS, to have this public thing. even if it's just for finding out the open shipping lanes, weather, things that we all know that we all need to have to make our own companies more efficient. We need to do that. And that's when I was like, that's when I knew that eventually we'd get there, when we're all going to tap off this public thing, but it's going to be private where it needs to be private. It's going to be public where we all need to use it for efficiency purposes.
Right on. And so there's a question, another question. Andy said, maybe I should already know this, but is there a co-op with the Interwork Alliance? And I think the Interwork Alliance is this thing that a guy I know, Ron Resnick, is and Marley Gray and folks from Microsoft are getting behind, which is sort of the building standards around tokens. And I think that's that's good work. I think they have. I don't know that it's so much a standard as it sounds like it's a tool where you put in some parameters and it'll give you a token template, and that sounds like a nice little tool to have. I don't know where the standard is in that, but it sounds like a nice tool. Maybe they'll sell it. I don't know. But Ron was the former executive director of the EEA, which is now being, let me make a little bit of news. It's out there in the public. Dan Burnett, who we'll have on the show in coming days, is the new executive director of the EEA. The way I like to call EEA, and I think Dan wouldn't disagree, although I don't want to put words in his mouth, I like to call it the Enterprise Ecosystem Alliance, because I don't think it's just about enterprise, right? It's about everybody. So that's an exciting piece of news. So no, we don't have an official co-op with the Interwork Alliance, but it's all in the family. We all know each other. Guys, which industry do you expect to transition blockchain technology first, and which do you think? Yeah, so which industry? I think Kyle, check my math here, but I think baselining is all about. It's kind of like a horizontal use case, right? It's not healthcare or it's any set of companies that need to do,
they use a database
process automation between them, right? So it's kind of like back in the day, everybody needed a website or a web page, right? And then they say, hey, I want a spinning logo on my web page. So you got, they pay you to do that. And then after that, they'd say, hey, I want a catalog on my web page. And then somebody finally said, hey, I want to sell that catalog on my web page. And then we had e-business and e-commerce and all that stuff. Same kind of thing, right? It's not that, you could be in any industry, but if you need to have verified processes where you have consistency and continuity of workflows between multiple entities, then that would be, I don't know, maybe we should call it B-commerce, right? It's a baseline commerce, right? You need to be able to baseline with other companies. We need a standard for that now, just like we needed standards around e-commerce. So it's a horizontal requirement, but it's very specific. I got a workflow, or I got 2 or 3 steps in a workflow. I'm going to buy something from you, or I'm going to move some stuff from me to you, or I'm going to ship my thing that you shouldn't know about who's shipping it to somebody else, and they should know only about what they know. Or I've got some pharmaceuticals and I've got a contract with you to wholesale them, but then we also have to track it all the way through to the pharmacy, but the pharmacy shouldn't know much about me. All this kind of compartmentalization requirements, that's where baselining shines.
It's cool because it's an enterprise computing standard meets a very specific sort of targeted business process automation use case in each circuit. So there's actually it's a really specific. It's like the most specific and large abstraction I've ever seen it play in the same context. It's kind of interesting. Right
on, and thanks for that. You're right, Kyle. I'm just reading through to try and make sure we didn't miss anybody's questions. We got talking about some cool stuff there, and I think I lost track of some. Saying we needed CAD drawings, having Crypto Rodolphus. It says the same. We need with CAD drawings having the newest one on the cloud. Now we must select a drawing by hand, then you have the danger of taking an older one. And I'll be honest, I'm missing context on that one. So if anybody's figuring that one out, please chime in. So our baselines competitors. Yeah, I think that I know that SAP just published something called, I think it's BBS or BSS, Kyle, which I think looks a lot like baselining. And
what's it called?
BBS or BSS. It was announced the other day, and we know a lot of those guys over at SAP and like them a lot.
Oh yeah, it does look like baseline a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't, and again, in an open standard, it doesn't really matter. That's not a competition. That's just saying,
No,
oh, good,
it's validation.
people interested in this pattern. Let's all get together.
Yeah.
There is no profit pattern.
It's huge validation for the direction.
Yeah, and open standards. If they open it, then we'll just absorb it, or merge with it, or they will come in hopefully and just take those ideas and make baseline better with them. At the end of the day,
or apply their specific implementations, across our interfaces.
Yeah, and either way, SAP is going to do well because the more baselining there is, the more SAP you're going to need.
So it just makes SAP even better.
Yep, and we're big fans of all those guys. They do a lot of work out there. You buy stuff, it probably knows SAP and Dynamics and Oracle and other things really well. All right, I think that's. We'll stay on for just a couple more minutes. If there are questions we really missed, feel free to reiterate them. Well, this week we were on longer than I expected. I thought we were going to just jump on, tell everybody to go to EY and jump off, but there's just so many people watching that I thought we'd better give a good show. So thanks everybody. And I see Tomasz is jumped in. Hey Tomasz. Hey Tomasz, you got anything to say before we sign off?
That's fine, thanks.
Okay. Everyone, thanks for a great show, for coming. Wow, on a day that we did not have a celebrity guest, and we told everybody to go away, to have 50 people still hanging out with us. That makes me feel really good. So
we're not going anywhere.
Right. We'll get over to that EY thing because there are some they're dropping some real knowledge there.
It's a really cool event for sure.
Okay.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks everyone.
If you don't know, or if you don't see, just head over to Jay at Twitter. I think close to the top of my feed, the link to it.
Bye everyone.
Kyle.
Yes.
Get back to work, man.
No. Thanks everyone. See ya.
Cheers. Bye.